"Daddy, tell me the truth, are birthdays only for rich kids?" The question landed between the chipped mugs and the stack of past-due envelopes like a small bright knife. Daniel Hale didn't look up right away. He kept counting coins into neat little towers, hands steady, jaw tight. The kitchen clock hummed. The fridge knocked once like a tired heart. "Birthdays," he said, forcing calm into every syllable, "are for people who love each other. And we've got that part covered." Maggie, all knees and wonder, swung her legs under the chair and watched him the way a hawk watches a field. 6 years old, in yesterday's pink socks, she wore a paper crown she had cut from a cereal box. She had colored it gold and glued on stars. One star was upside down. It made Daniel's chest ache. "Do we need a lot of dollars for love?" she pressed. "We don't need a lot of dollars," he said. "But candles. Candles do help." He smiled to make it sound like a joke. Maggie smiled back. "Kids are merciful like that." She slid a sheet of paper across the table. A drawing, a round cake with swirls of frosting, 6 candles blazing like tiny suns. She had written in careful block letters, "Daddy, it's okay if it's little." "It'll be perfect," Daniel promised, because promises are the only currency some fathers have. When he finally lifted his eyes to the pile of coins, the story they told was simple and cruel. He had enough for groceries, maybe the bus fare, not the cake he'd priced at DeLuca's on Broad Street. He'd worked double at the docks this week. Overtime had evaporated into rent and the electric bill. His palms still sang with the memory of rope burn from hauling lines in a wind that cut straight through bone. He pulled open a drawer, took out an envelope labeled M for Maggie, for miracles, for maybe. Crammed inside were 2 crumpled 5s, a handful of quarters, and a receipt with a smiley face sticker the cashier had given Maggie months ago. Daniel smoothed the bills, counted again, and pictured the 6-inch vanilla with buttercream roses. He'd done the math 3 times. The price hadn't changed. The math didn't care about his daughter's birthday. "Brush," he said, tapping his own teeth. "Jacket. We're catching the early bus." "Are we getting the cake?" Daniel lifted her paper crown, settled it more squarely on her head. "We're going to make a plan." The bus was half empty and smelled faintly of winter coats and old coffee. Maggie pressed her nose to the glass, narrating the city as if it were a picture book. "Look, a dog that thinks he's a lion. And that building is wearing a hat. And that tree is pointing where the birds went." Daniel listened, collecting her words like warm pebbles. When she fell quiet, he checked his phone. 2 messages, one from Mike at the docks. "Got another shift if you need it." The other from the landlord. Rent must clear by the 5th, which glowed like a small threat he had no energy to fight. DeLuca's bakery sat at the corner of Broad and 3rd, its windows fogged with sugar and heat, the kind of place that made the world seem softer than it was. A bell chimed when they entered. The air hit Daniel like a memory vanilla lemon zest, the sweet weight of butter. For one dizzy second, he was 21 again, covered in flour, dreaming of a shop with his name on the window. Then Maggie tugged his sleeve and the present snapped back. A woman with flour on her apron smiled from behind the counter. "Well, if it isn't my favorite crown-wearer." Maggie executed a regal nod. "We came to see the cakes." "And to place an order," Daniel added, keeping his voice steady. He slid the folded list from his pocket. 6-inch round, vanilla sponge, buttercream, rainbow sprinkles, 6 candles. He said it all as if naming made it true. "Pick up tomorrow," the woman asked. "Tomorrow," Daniel said, "because hope has a date and a time." She tapped the tablet. "That'll be..." He knew the number. He had rehearsed his response. "Could I leave a deposit today?" he said carefully. "And settle the rest at pickup." The woman hesitated. Her name tag read Anna. Her eyes softened, then flicked to Maggie and back. "We usually need payment in full to start," she said gently. "But let me see what we can do." "It's okay," Maggie whispered to the glass, fogging it with a hopeful cloud. "A small cake can still have big wishes." Anna returned. "I can do half, now half tomorrow. But I'll need a name." "Maggie," he said. "For Maggie." He laid every bill and quarter on the counter. The stack looked thinner in the bright light. It made a small sound when he slid it forward, a sound that embarrassed him. Anna counted fast and kind, like she was protecting him from the math. "See you tomorrow, birthday girl," she said, and tucked a single sugar cookie into a paper bag. On the house. Outside, Maggie bit the cookie and announced, "This tastes like sunshine." She offered the last bite to Daniel. He took it because fathers should taste sunshine sometimes, even if it's just sugar and butter in disguise. He left Maggie with Miss Ortiz across the hall, a saint with a laugh that could warm a room. Then he hustled to the docks for an extra shift, the air sharp enough to cut. The harbor heaved under a pewter sky. Somewhere a gull squealed its hungry complaint. Men moved like shadows, each shouldering his own private storm. "Thought you'd be in today." Mike grunted, handing him a pair of stiff gloves. "You've got that look." "What look?" Daniel asked. The look of a man who's choosing between bills and something that makes a 6-year-old believe the world's kind. Daniel didn't smile. There wasn't time. They backed a truck to a loading bay and started in on pallets of boxed produce. After an hour, Daniel's shoulders burned. After 2, his knuckles had gone numb. He welcomed it. Pain meant progress. Numbness meant he could keep going. At lunch, he warmed his hands around a vending machine coffee and stared at the cracked asphalt. Mike sat beside him, offering half a ham sandwich and the kind of conversation that doesn't ask for more than you can give. "How's the kid?" Mike asked. "Counting stars," Daniel said, surprising himself. "Good," Mike said. "Kids should count stars. Grown-ups count circles on bills on clocks." He took a bite, chewed. "You still wearing it?" Daniel's fingers went instinctively to the chain under his shirt. The ring hung there, small and smooth. Her ring. He'd stopped wearing his wedding band on his hand when the skin beneath it had thinned from rope and salt. But he kept hers close the way you keep a lighthouse in fog. "Some days," he said. "Some days it feels heavy, and that's okay." Mike nodded. "Tomorrow's the birthday. Tomorrow. You'll pull it off," Mike said simply. "You always do." Daniel didn't argue. He just closed his eyes and pictured buttercream roses. By dusk, the city had shifted into that soft gray that makes the edges of things feel undecided. Daniel retrieved Maggie, thanked Miss Ortiz with an extra bag of oranges the docks had let him buy cheap. At home, they ate pasta with jarred sauce and laughed when a noodle leapt from Maggie's fork onto the floor like a tiny acrobat. After dinner, Maggie climbed onto his lap with a stack of picture books. He read until his voice scratched, then made up a story when the book ended too soon. Once upon a time, he told her there was a girl who wore a crown made of cereal boxes and stars, and every room she entered learned how to be warm. "That's not how crowns work," she giggled. "It is in this story," he said. When she fell asleep, Daniel stood at the window and watched the city from 6 floors up. Across the street, a man in a blue hoodie balanced a pizza box on one palm like a waiter in an old movie. 2 doors down, someone practiced the trumpet badly and bravely. In the apartment below, a TV laughed at a joke none of them would remember. He spread the bills for tomorrow's remaining balance on the table, counted again, and felt the ground tilt. Even with the overtime, even with the groceries cut to the bone, he was short. Not by much enough that pride and panic began their old argument in his chest. He imagined walking back into DeLuca's and explaining it to Anna. Half now, half later, he had promised. Promises and coins. Crowns and candles. The old temptation crept in quiet and cunning pawn the ring. He closed his hand around it and squeezed until the imprint bit his palm. No. There were lines a man didn't cross even for frosting and 6 small flames. The clock marked off a minute like it was a mile. Daniel inhaled, exhaled, and did the one thing he knew could make a difference. He picked up his phone and texted Mike. "If tomorrow needs hands, mine are ready. Any hour." The reply came fast. "Sunrise pickup. Not glamorous. Pays cash." He typed, "I'll be there." He put Maggie's crown next to her drawing on the table. In the silence that followed, the apartment felt almost gentle. He switched off the kitchen light, then switched it on again, then off. The room changed colors like a thought adjusting itself. On his way to bed, he paused by Maggie's door. She slept with one fist curled under her cheek, a small smile, like a secret. Daniel leaned against the frame and whispered to the darkness a prayer that wasn't really a prayer, more like a pledge between a man and the world he refused to accept at its worst. "We're going to make it bright," he said. "I don't know how yet, but I will." He closed the door halfway and let the hallway's thin glow paint a line of gold across the floorboards. Back at the table, he gathered the coins into an envelope and wrote one sentence across the front in block letters that echoed Maggie's, because sometimes a father needs to see his own hope in ink. "Tomorrow will be her birthday, and I have nothing left to give." He underlined the sentence once. Then he added a second line beneath it. "So I'll find something. Sir, I'm sorry. If you can't cover the balance, I can't release the cake." The words were gentle, but they landed like a gavel. Daniel Hale's fingers tightened around the envelope of cash-worn paper, warm from his palm, damp with the salt of a dawn he had already given away. Beside him, Maggie stood very straight in her wool coat, a paper crown tucked carefully into her pocket like a secret she still believed in. "How much am I short?" he asked. Anna, the clerk, with flour on her sleeves and kindness in her eyes, glanced at the screen. $3.42. Daniel exhaled, not in defeat, but in the slow adjustment of a man moving weight from one shoulder to the other. He had done a sunrise pickup at the docks for cash. He'd stretched every coin, then remembered the bus fare he hadn't counted the oranges for Miss Ortiz because gratitude needs citrus sometimes. 342. A number small enough to be cruel. "It's okay," Maggie whispered without looking up. "We can pretend. I'm good at pretending." "We don't pretend about birthdays," Daniel said, keeping his voice soft. "We aim for light." A line formed behind them. Shoes shifted. Someone coughed as if their time had a price tag. From the far corner, a barista steamed milk that sounded exactly like the ocean when it's trying to apologize. Anna hesitated. "Let me see if Mr. DeLuca can approve the release. You already paid half yesterday. Maybe we can." A man in a white jacket appeared broad as a refrigerator and twice as immovable. "Policy is policy," he said, not unkindly, just used to gravity. "You pay, we release. I can hold it till close. After that, it goes to the case." "I'll bring the rest by noon," Daniel said. "Swear to it." Sir DeLuca said, lowering his voice. "Your word is good here, but the register doesn't take promises." Daniel swallowed. A stranger behind them reached into his pocket coins, chiming like small apologies. "Here," the man said, offering his hand. "No big deal." Daniel didn't turn. Pride has a shape. His filled his chest like a brace. "Thank you," he said, "but I won't ask my daughter to learn. Thank you the hard way." Maggie looked up at him, then a question poised on her lip, and love refusing to let it fall. He knew the lesson he was burning into the air, that the world isn't a ledger and dignity doesn't go on clearance. He eased the envelope back into his coat, smoothed the front of Maggie's wool. "We'll be back," he told Anna. "Please keep her name on it." "What name?" DeLuca asked. Maggie Anna said before Daniel could answer. She held his gaze for one extra heartbeat, as if trying to memorize it in case the day asked her to be brave. "I'll hold it as long as I can." "Thank you," Daniel said. He reached for Maggie's hand. She took it instantly, the most expensive thing he'd hold all day. They stepped toward the door, the bell already breathing in to chime them out. That was when the door opened inward. Clara Rhodes didn't belong in a bakery at 11:37 on a weekday. Her calendar only left room for glossy boardrooms and rooms that pretended to be warmer than they were. But she had insisted on this visit to DeLuca's, one of the boutiques her company was courting for a heritage line of artisanal partnerships. Authenticity couldn't be focus grouped. You had to smell it. Butter, lemon, zest, vanilla, these were truths. Miss Rhodes said the junior brand manager at her elbow voice pitched to the veneration reserved for saints and venture capital. "We've arranged a tasting in back and Mr. DeLuca wait," Clara said, eyes sweeping the counter. She saw a man, thin, work-hardened, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She saw a little girl holding herself very still as if stillness could keep dreams from falling. She saw money refuse to be enough. "Sir." "I'm sorry," Anna said again, quieter now. Clara felt the familiar click inside the one that ran the empire. Patience tethered to precision. "We sell comfort, not math," she had told her CFO last quarter. He'd replied, "Comfort costs math." She knew he was right. She also knew there were moments when the balance sheet had to lose on purpose. The man turned toward the door, and Clara saw his face fully. There are looks you learn to recognize if you grow up in certain houses. Men leaving hospital rooms, women leaving courtrooms, people trying to leave grief and finding it sits in the passenger seat. The look said, "I will not take what I cannot pay, even if the price is a candle blown cold." The girl squeezed his hand. "Daddy," she said, bright because she refused to make this moment heavier than he could carry when we get home. "Can we practice wishing with our eyes closed? That's free." Clara's throat heated. She stepped aside to let them pass. The man nodded, once polite, proud, unbent. The bell rang. They were gone. Ms. Rhodes, the brand manager, ventured. "We should give me 1 minute," Clara said. She approached the counter. Anna recognized her eyes widening, then settling into professional composure. Mr. DeLuca's posture shifted the way men reflexively stand straighter when money walks in wearing boots. "Good morning," Clara said. Her voice could do a lot of things. Today, it chose simple. "I'd like to pay the remaining balance on the cake for the girl." "Maggie." DeLuca blinked. "We can't give out customer information," he began. "I'm not asking for it," Clara said. She slid a sleek card onto the counter. It made no sound. "I'm asking you to finish the job you started. Make the cake he ordered. Exact to spec. 6-inch vanilla buttercream rainbow sprinkles 6 candles. Add a sugar crown. Put Maggie on the box. And then you have his contact number from yesterday's deposit," Clara said. "At close call and say there's a birthday surprise waiting. No names attached. If they can't pick up, deliver it. I'll cover the fee. If they refuse to accept, donate it anonymously to the children's shelter 2 blocks over. But make it." DeLuca looked at the card, then at Clara. "We don't usually." "Usually is a weather report," she said mildly. "Today's a forecast we're going to change." Anna's mouth tilted. "I can make the sugar crown," she said. "I have gold dust." Clara nodded once. "Make it shine." Behind her, the brand manager had turned into the kind of statue carved out of anxiety. "Ms. Rhodes," he murmured, "PR will want to coordinate." "This isn't PR," Clara said, still not looking back. "This is a cake." DeLuca ran the card. Machines beeped. Paper whispered. He slid the receipt across as if passing a note in class. "Do you want a name on the sponsor line?" Clara took the pen and wrote, "A neighbor who believes in wishes." She pushed it back. "If he asks who paid, you say, someone who remembers being 6. Nothing more. Anna quietly bagged a dozen butter cookies and tucked them aside. For the party, she said to no one in particular. Clara breathed in vanilla and let it anchor her. Efficiency builds empires, she thought. Mercy builds homes. She'd had one and lost the other, and on mornings like this she understood what could be rebuilt if you were stubborn where it mattered. "Thank you," she said and meant it, and turned toward the back room. Business waited. Spreadsheets don't clap. Outside, the winter noon had pressed itself into a bright coin. Daniel and Maggie sat on the bench by the bus stop watching the world right itself in wind. He'd chosen the bench instead of going home because sometimes a man needs to let the moment cool before he carries it to his kitchen. Maggie swung her legs. "Can wishes get tired? They can," Daniel said. "But if you let them nap, they wake up meaner." She giggled. "I want mine to wake up nicer. Then we'll give it a blanket." They watched a woman in a red hat walk a dog who believed in destiny. A delivery guy balanced 3 cups of coffee like he was auditioning for a better hour. Across the street, a kid tossed a basketball to a crooked rim and grinned when gravity chose to be kind. Daddy Maggie asked, "Yeah, are you sad we didn't get the cake? I'm disappointed," he said. Sad is heavy. Disappointed has a handle. "Maybe the cake needs us to find it," she said, and Daniel had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep the right words. "We'll find a way," he said. Always. The bus arrived with a sigh big enough to carry a neighborhood. They climbed aboard, found 2 seats that made them a pair. In the reflection of the window, Daniel saw a man who had not folded. He could live with that. Back at DeLuca's, Clara sat through a tasting of lemon ricotta cookies and an olive oil cake that tasted like it had married sunlight. She asked precise questions about sourcing, and margins, nodded at things worth nodding at, approved what deserved to be loved. When business was done, she stood, shook hands, and paused by the counter. Anna lifted the boxed cake from the back as if unveiling a future. The sugar crown caught the light with quiet audacity. Across the white top, in careful piping, a name, Maggie. Clara felt the oddest urge to reach out and straighten something that wasn't crooked. "Beautiful," she said softly. "Would you like to leave a card?" Anna asked. Clara considered. Cards become proof. Proof invites story. Story grows teeth. This wasn't for teeth. She tore a rectangle from a brown paper bag and wrote in a tight, neat hand, "Happy birthday, Maggie. May every candle bring you closer to the light you already are." A neighbor. Anna slid the note under the ribbon. "We'll keep it cold and call him before close." "Good," Clara said. She picked up her leather gloves. "If he asks why, tell him a stranger decided to mind her own business better." Anna smiled. "I can do that." Clara stepped into the cold, the air snapping clean around her like a pressed shirt. A message from her CFO pinged her phone. Another meeting. Another decision that wouldn't remember the taste of butter. She started walking anyway, long strides breath a visible contract with January. Behind her, in a glass-fronted case, a small cake waited with 6 candles and a sugar crown. Somewhere across the city, a little girl was practicing how to wish with her eyes closed, and a father was deciding again what he could carry. And somewhere in the narrowing space between them, something ordinary had already begun to change. "Make it shine," Clara had said. The oven lights glowed, and DeLuca's bakery obliged. "Mr. Hale, this is Anna from DeLuca's. If you can come by before close, there's a birthday surprise waiting for Maggie." Daniel gripped the phone like it might bolt. He said nothing for a beat, then careful. "There's a mistake." "No mistake," Anna replied. Someone covered the balance. They left a note. A pause that felt like a held breath. "We were asked not to say more." Daniel looked toward the couch where Maggie was building a fort out of library books and good intentions. Her paper crown rested on the arm like a loyal guard. "Thank you," he said. "We'll be there in 20. "Take your time," Anna said softly. "We'll keep it cold." He hung up. Maggie popped her head out of the blanket fort. "Is the surprise a dog? If it's a dog, I will name him Pancake." "It's a cake," Daniel said, and the word felt almost holy. "Put on your shoes. We've got candles to count." The city had traded afternoon glare for a pewter sheen, the kind of light that makes street lamps honest. The bus, side up, blinked its route number like a secret. On board, Maggie pressed her forehead to the glass as if the view could be absorbed straight into her bones. "Daddy," she whispered as if not to wake the promise, "did the cake remember our address all by itself? Sometimes he said wishes borrow the right feet." DeLuca's bell chimed them into warmth. Behind the counter, Anna's smile managed both celebration and discretion. She set a white box on the glass tied with red ribbon. Nestled under the bow was a torn scrap of brown paper. In tidy block letters, "Happy Birthday, Maggie. May every candle bring you closer to the light you already are." A neighbor. Maggie stood on tiptoe. "Is it for real?" "For real," Anna said. "And there's this." From beneath the counter she lifted a little plastic pouch. 6 slim candles and 1 sugar crown brushed with gold. The crown sits on top when the candles are done, making their case to the universe. DeLuca himself lumbered out from the back, wiping his hands on a towel. He nodded at Daniel with a kind of quiet apology that didn't ask to be forgiven. "We ran the card," he said. "We did what we were told." "What were you told?" Daniel asked. DeLuca glanced at the note. "To make it perfect." Daniel's throat went tight. He slid his hand over the box as if the cardboard could read gratitude through skin. Who Anna's answer was ready and worn smooth. "A neighbor who believes in wishes," she said. Her eyes said, "Please don't make me break a promise I'm proud of keeping." Maggie leaned toward the box, exhaling a sound only children make when the world stops being a rumor. "Can we open it now? I promise I won't eat it with my eyeballs." "We'll open it at home," Daniel said. "Cakes have favorite rooms." Anna tucked a small white bag along with the box. "Don't argue," she said, voice bright as foil. "Butter cookies. For guests, imaginary or otherwise." He reached for his wallet. She shook her head. Already paid for. He hesitated, then put both palms on the counter the way a man does when he vows without words. "Please tell our neighbor that some gifts are heavy because they're carrying someone's hope." "I'll tell them," Anna said. Exactly like that. They carried the box like a secret through the early dark. On the bus, Maggie sat up straight, hands folded so carefully in her lap that strangers smiled into their coats. A teenager with chipped nail polish offered her a seat by the window as if knighting her. At home, Daniel set the box on the wobbly table as if crowning a city. He didn't own fancy plates or a camera with a lens meant to remember, but he had string lights looped around a crooked nail and a neighbor who banged on the door at the right time. Miss Ortiz stood there with a carton of chocolate milk and 2 paper cups. "I heard a rumor," she said, eyes already shining. "I brought the press. Please come," Daniel said. We were about to start negotiations with fire. He lifted the lid. The room inhaled. Buttercream roses, white and pale pink, circled a ring of rainbow sprinkles. In the center, a blank field of smooth icing waited like fresh snow. Maggie clasped her hands under her chin, a posture older than kingdoms. "May I put the crown?" she asked. "After the candles," Daniel said. "Ceremony has an order." He set the 6 slim candles into the frosting with a care that made Ms. Ortiz blink back something she refused to call tears. He struck a match. For a second, sulfur flared like a thrown voice. Then, wick by wick, light caught light. Daddy Maggie said, hushed as if the cake might spook. "It's like 6 tiny summers." He leaned close. "Make your wish." She looked at the flames at his hands, at the room that was too small and exactly right. She closed her eyes. Her paper crown glinted on the chair. When she spoke, the words were steady and clear. "I wish Mommy could see us now." The line fell gentle and fierce. Daniel's chest folded in on itself and kept beating anyway. Ms. Ortiz made a sound like a prayer that remembered how to stand. He bent and kissed the top of Maggie's head. "I think she does," he managed. "I think she's clapping the loudest." Maggie blew. The candles surrendered one by one, smoke writing the air with quick gray sentences that said, "We happened." Daniel pressed the sugar crown into the center. It sat there ridiculous and perfect, catching strings of light and returning them warmer. "Cut," Ms. Ortiz declared, wiping her eyes without apology. "The kingdom is hungry." Daniel sliced carefully as if the right portion might tip the world toward decent. He set the first piece before Maggie. She lifted her fork, then paused. "Can I do something?" "Anything," he said. She took the paper note from the ribbon, smoothed its torn edge, and slid it under the edge of the plate like a place card. "So the neighbor can sit with us," she explained. "Just in case they're invisible tonight." Daniel swallowed. "That's good hosting." They ate. Butter and vanilla sugar and something else that recipes can't list. Laughter came easy. The chocolate milk tasted fancier than champagne. Ms. Ortiz told a story about her brother learning to whistle and almost swallowing his pride and the tune both. Maggie performed a royalty wave directed at the toaster. For a whole hour, the apartment forgot the stack of albatross envelopes in the drawer. After the second slice, Maggie slid off her chair and disappeared into her room. She came back with her crayons and the last clean sheet of printer paper in the house. Tongue between her teeth, she drew a round cake under a crown 6 candles, 3 faces. She printed in careful letters, "Thank you, neighbor. You're invited." She held it up. "Do you think the note can find them?" Notes Daniel thought have better aim than rich men and weather. "We'll help it," he said. "We'll bring it back to the bakery tomorrow and ask them to deliver." Miss Ortiz watched him as she gathered cups. "You're going to chase this kindness," she said. "Not a question." "I'm going to return it," he replied. "If I can't pay it back, I'll pay it forward so hard it makes a noise." She nodded. "Good. The world hears that kind of noise." Maggie yawned, then the kind that tilts a child into another day. Daniel lifted her easily, felt the weight that was equal parts miracle and mandate. "I'm not tired," she murmured into his collar. "I know," he said. "Sleep anyway. Tomorrow we practice being sick some more." He tucked her in. She put the paper crown on the nightstand like a lighthouse. He stood a long moment in the doorway, everything in him raw and grateful and trying to inventory the pieces of this night he'd want to keep if fire came. Back at the table, the sugar crown sat proud on what remained. The brown paper note winked under a crumb. He picked it up and read it again. "May every candle bring you closer to the light you already are." He turned it over. Blank. Of course it was blank. It wasn't about breadcrumbs. It was about bread. He took a pen and under the original lines wrote his own. "To the neighbor who remembered being 6. Your gift arrived on time. So did we. D&M." He folded the paper around Maggie's drawing like armor. He placed both in an envelope and propped it against the salt shaker so Morning wouldn't forget to be brave. Ms. Ortiz slipped on her coat. At the door, she touched his forearm. "You did right today," she said. "I didn't do anything," he answered. "You didn't let the day decide for you," she corrected. "That's doing." When she left, the apartment was quiet enough to hear the refrigerator rehearse its next sigh. Daniel washed 2 plates and a promise. He dried his hands on the good towel, the one that only qualifies as good because it still remembers being new. He sat, pulled the wedding ring on its chain from beneath his shirt and set it beside the envelope. "We made it bright," he said to the small gold circle and whatever it stood for tonight. "Thank you for the light we borrowed." He looked at the cake, at the crown, at the half-dozen spent candles. Tomorrow he would go to DeLuca's with the note. Tomorrow he would ask Anna to pass it along. Tomorrow he would accept that anonymity is a kindness too, and still try to offer his name in return. He switched off the string lights. The room settled into a softer dark. From down the hall, Maggie's small voice drifted out heavy with sleep. "Daddy, I'm here. Don't forget to save a piece for the neighbor." He smiled into the dark. "I won't." He didn't know it yet, but saving that piece was already a door. The envelope weighed almost nothing, and still Daniel Hale carried it like a brick of gold. Inside Maggie's crayon crown, a round cake under 6 bright lines, 3 smiling faces. Beneath it, his careful block letters. "To the neighbor who remembered being 6. Your gift arrived on time. So did we. D&M." He and Maggie had walked it back to DeLuca's at opening. Anna read the note with the reverence usually reserved for prayer cards and love letters, then slid it into a sleeve. "I can pass this along," she said. "We used a corporate liaison yesterday. We won't break anonymity, but we'll try to make sure it lands." "A liaison?" Daniel asked. "Rhodes Foods has a partnership program with small bakeries." Anna said neutral, but hopeful. "Sometimes corporate neighbors are useful for more than paperwork." Daniel nodded, absorbing the name as if it were a street on a map he'd never walked. He thanked her, bought a day-old baguette for $1 and walked Maggie to Ms. Ortiz's before his afternoon shift. By noon, he stood on the sidewalk under a column of glass that punched at the sky. The plaque read Rhodes Foods Headquarters in brushed steel that reflected the city like it needed a costume. The lobby beyond was a cathedral of light and restraint slate floors, water walls, a living wall of green that looked like a spreadsheet pretending to be a forest. Inside, the security desk had the exact energy of an embassy polite inviolable. A guard with soft eyes and a jaw like an apology looked up. His badge read, Henderson. "Good afternoon," Henderson said. "Appointment." "No," Daniel said, holding up the envelope. "Just a drop-off. A thank you. For someone who lives in this building, in a way." Henderson took the measure of him, the clean work jacket that would never look expensive, the hands scrubbed but still honest with rope burn the way dignity adds 2 inches to a man's height. "We can accept items for employees," he said. "Who's it for? A neighbor," Daniel said, and heard himself. "It's complicated." Everything as Henderson replied, not unkindly. "I can't log complicated into the system. A name helps things find their people." "What if the person doesn't want to be found?" Daniel asked. "What if they wanted their kindness to do its work and go quiet?" "Then the building eats the envelope," Henderson said. "We feed it a lot." Daniel half smiled. "This one deserves a name on a door, even if it doesn't get one on the envelope." Sir Henderson said gently, "I'd like to help, but rules keep the roof up." "I don't want to break a rule," Daniel said. "I want to keep a promise." The words hung in the cool air between them, the sort of sentence that lands and echo lives on the far wall. Henderson's eyes shifted not to soften but to register weight. He glanced at the side of the desk where a clear bin labeled "Food No Entry" sat half-filled with takeout bags that hadn't made the cut. Daniel followed his gaze. "I brought a piece of cake," he admitted, patting the tote at his feet. "We saved a slice. My daughter made me swear. But I get it. Food's not allowed." Henderson's mouth twitched. He lowered his voice. "I have a break in 7 minutes," he said. "If you leave, hypothetical cake with a hypothetical stranger who happens to be on a city sidewalk and not governed by lobby policy, hypothetically I could make sure it becomes unhypothetical." Daniel set the tote on the floor. "You're a good man, Mr. Henderson. I'm a father," Henderson said. "Different word for the same job most days." Footsteps clicked across the slate. A small entourage flowed through the security gates, 2 assistants, one legal counsel trailing papers like a comet tail, and at their center a woman in a winter white coat that made the lobby look underdressed. Clara Rhodes moved like a decision. Chin-level gaze direct the kind of posture wealth buys and grief hardens. Her hair was neat in the way that tells the world to file itself. People made room because rooms learn their rulers. Ms. Rhodes' one assistant murmured, passing a tablet. "Sustainability deck at 2. Media brief at 3. Legal flagged the community pilot budget you'll need to." "Later," she said, eyes already scanning the front desk. "Henderson, good afternoon." "Ma'am," he nodded. "Afternoon." Clara's gaze flicked to Daniel, took him in the way a scanner takes in a boarding pass. "The bakery, the bell," the man sang. "We don't pretend about birthdays," flashed in a corner of her mind she tried not to admit existed. She stopped. "Do you need assistance?" she asked. The words wore every inch of corporate polish and still managed something human. "I'm trying to leave a thank you," Daniel said, lifting the envelope with someone who prefers the shade to the spotlight. Clara's mouth bent into something that wasn't yet a smile. "We specialize in spotlights," she said. "Shade we outsource," I figured, Daniel said. I thought about outsourcing my gratitude. It refused to be subcontracted. Henderson looked down as if studying the pattern in the slate. His radio muttered static. The assistants hovered agitated satellites. "Sir," the younger one tried Miss Rhodes' schedule. Clara held up a hand. She nodded toward a seating area where modern furniture pretended to be comfortable. 2 minutes, she told Daniel. "If you'd like to sit." "I don't want to take your time," he said. "You already did," she answered. "Now let's make it worth something." They sat across a low table, polished to a mirror. Daniel placed the envelope between them. Up close, Clara's face was more delicate than the profile on magazine covers. The armor lived in her tone, not her features. What happened yesterday at the bakery, she said, wasn't cheap. I know, he replied. It was priceless. Her eyes tipped lower, approving the answer. And anonymous, she added. Only to other people, he said. Not to me. Clara's brows tightened. How so? Because my daughter went to bed believing the world is capable of remembering children without being asked, Daniel said. I don't need a name to say thank you to that. Many people confuse charity with confession, Clara said, tilting her head. They want to be seen helping. I don't want to be seen taking, he answered, but I need to be heard giving thanks. There's a difference. She leaned back slightly. Who are you, Mr. Hale, he said. Daniel. What do you do, Mr. Hale? I carry things, he said simply. Sometimes they're heavy, and before you carried heavy things, he weighed the sentence. Before I made light. Cakes. Bread. He half smiled, almost apologized. Some mistakes you can eat. A hairline crack crossed Clara's cool composure. You were a baker. I was a man who believed heat could fix what cold broke, he said. Then life burned down the kitchen. Clara stared for a beat, the world falling quieter, an unhelpful habit she trained herself out of after funerals. I'm sorry, she said, and startled herself by meaning it without qualification. He nodded, once accepting sympathy without drowning in it. The point is, he continued, tapping the envelope with one finger. This needs to reach the person who kept a promise to a stranger yesterday. If that's Ms. Corporate Neighbor or Mr. Somebody upstairs, I don't care. I just want them to know we saved them a piece. You brought cake into my lobby, she asked, feigning offense to cover the sudden ache tightrope walking her chest. I brought proof that we remember, he said. It's in the bag by the desk, and Mr. Henderson is committed to radical hypotheticals. Clara glanced toward the guard, who was too disciplined to look interested. She considered a dozen angles, a dozen risks, and put them away. We can ensure a delivery, she said at last. Rhodes has a concierge desk. Write what you want. We'll route it. I already wrote, he said. Words feel truer when they rest overnight. Do you want a return address? He shook his head. If the neighbor refuses to be known, tell them we use the light. For the first time, Clara's smile arrived without an escort. It softened her eyes, cut 10 years off the myth the business press had written for her. You talk like a man who knows how to let gratitude keep its dignity. Charity looks down, Daniel said. Gratitude looks you in the eye. She studied him, then the envelope, then the reflection of both in the lacquered table. The assistant cleared his throat with the eagerness of a dentist who's found an extra tooth. Clara ignored him. How old is your daughter? She asked. 6, he said. Today she believes in crowns made of cereal boxes and stars. I'd like to extend that belief another day. Happy birthday to her, Clara said quietly. If there was a tremor in the words, only she felt it. I'll tell her the lady in the white coat said so. Daniel replied, not quite teasing. She'll think you're a snow queen. Clara's laugh was small and surprised. She wouldn't be the first, she said, but queens with working heat are rarer than we admit. She reached for the envelope. Their fingers didn't touch, but the air between them registered in tension. I'll make sure this lands, she said. No names as requested. Thank you, Daniel said, standing. I don't mean to disrupt your kingdom. We call it a company, she said, rising too, but some days it thinks it's more. He glanced at the water wall at the living green. A building can forget it's in the business of people, he said. Happens to men, too. Clara felt the sentence take root somewhere inconvenient. She extended her hand. Mr. Hale, she said, voice resuming its armor. If the world ever tells you thank you isn't necessary, please understand it's lying. He shook her hand, firm, direct. If the world ever tells you kindness is a rounding error, it's lying back. They stood in that odd accord a moment longer, the kind that doesn't know its name yet. Then the assistant, emboldened by a calendar, stepped forward. Ms. Rhodes, he urged, legal is waiting. Legal can wait for what's lawful, Clara said. I'm busy with what's right. She turned to Henderson. Officer, please accept a food item from Mr. Hale. Proceed with the hypothetical. Yes, ma'am, he said, a smile flickering, quick and gone. Daniel lifted the tote and set it by the desk as if laying an offering at a practical altar. He tipped 2 fingers at Henderson, then at Clara. Thank you for the 2 minutes, he said. You used them well, Clara replied. He walked toward the revolving door. The lobby was suddenly full of the noises he hadn't heard when he came in. The shiver of water, the modest applause of shoes on stone, the steady breath of a building remembering to be a place for people. At the threshold he paused and looked back. If you see our neighbor, he said, tell them we saved them a seat. Clara nodded. I'll deliver the message. The door turned. Outside, the city welcomed him with a wind that made promises sound braver. Inside, Clara stood very still until the assistant, the counsel the world remembered her. She passed the envelope to him with a care that dared him to fumble. Route this through, concierge, she said. No names, no press. If anyone asks, tell them a neighbor minded their own business better. Yes, Miss Rhodes. Clara headed toward the elevators. On the ride up, her reflection in the mirrored wall looked exactly like the woman the magazines like to label the ice queen of consumer goods. She pressed her lips together, then let them soften. Consumers feel she murmured to no one. Spreadsheets keep score. When the doors opened onto the executive floor, her assistant offered the updated sustainability deck. She took it without looking. All right, she said. Let's talk about what warmth costs and what cold has cost us already. Remember the name, Hale. Clara read the sentence aloud because her father's handwriting had always sounded like weather pressure falling, meaning coming. The leather journal lay open across her lap, the spine cracked the way a life cracks from use. She sat on the floor of her penthouse study back against a low bookcase winter dusk, turning the windows into mirrors. Around her, a shoebox of medals, no one dusted a creased black and white photo of men, squinting into too much sun, a folded flag that made the room stand straighter. Her father, Colonel Richard Rhodes, hadn't been a poet. His words marched. Still, once in a while, he smuggled tenderness into the margins. She traced the sentence again with a fingertip as if the ink might rise warm. If I don't return, remember the name Hale. The man pulled me from fire. He gave me half his water and laughed to make it easy. He said he used to bake bread that made men late to work. I told him if I saw home again, I'd owe a debt I could not pay. Clara swallowed against the sudden, unreasonable fact of tears. People called her the Ice Queen as if ice weren't just water learning how to hold. She closed her eyes and saw him not the colonel on magazine covers, but the man who had taught her how to tie double knots and how to keep a promise so clean it made the air smell better. Her phone buzzed against the rug. Evan, her chief of staff, appeared on the screen reminder board review on community pilot budgets at 9 a.m. tomorrow. CFO flagged cuts. She silenced it. Tonight, the future would wait for the past to finish speaking. She turned another page. The paper sighed. Hale. H-A-L-E. If they ask why I keep writing it, tell them some names are lifelines. It was raining red clay and diesel when he found me. He smelled like flour anyway. Clara exhaled a broken laugh. He smelled like flour. The sentence folded time like a napkin. In the bakery yesterday, she'd bought a cake for a little girl named Maggie because the math hadn't been kind to her father. In the lobby today, that same father had handed her an envelope and a line that had stuck to her ribs. Charity looks down. Gratitude looks you in the eye. Hale. Daniel Hale. It could be coincidence. The world was full of Hales and fire and men who learned to carry more than their share. But sometimes life brings a word twice and means for you to notice. Clara rose, setting the journal on her desk as if it were a living thing. The study's built-in shelves were neat to the point of apology. She'd always believed order could keep grief from spilling. She crossed to a locked cabinet, keyed a code, and slid out a slim archival binder the family lawyer had sent after her father's funeral. Inside, a letter in her father's miserable printing written on government stationery that pretended to be paper. To my daughter, who will do difficult things and smile anyway, it began. If the world grows cold, take these stories out and warm your hands. She turned to a page with a photograph tucked behind it. Two young men, dirty as victory, shoulder to shoulder in a place the photo refused to name. The caption, in faded ballpoint R, Rhodes plus W. Hale. Just like that. A name whose gravity changed the room. Clara's heart thudded once a knock from the inside. W, she said softly to the photograph. What did it stand for? William Walter. What kitchen did you lose to war? Mr. Hale, her phone lit again. This time she picked up. Evan, she said. Here he answered too bright. Did you see my note? Finance wants find me a list, she said. My father's unit roster. Cross-reference any service records we can access without breaking laws or waking ghosts. Look for the last name Hale. A first initial W if we're lucky. Evan paused, recalibrating from budgets to bloodlines. Yes, ma'am. May I ask you? May not, she said gentler than the sentence had any right to be. Also, call the Foundation archives. Ask Marjorie to pull anything we have in the Veterans Oral History Project. Same search, understood. And Evan. Yes, tomorrow's board review, we're not cutting the community pilot, she said. If finance brings me math, I'll bring them a room full of names. When she hung up, the apartment felt suddenly too elegant for what she was doing. She kicked off her shoes, tucked her feet under her, and kept reading. If I don't return, remember the name Hale. He didn't say Godspeed. He said save room for dessert. Some men pray with words. He prayed with a joke. Clara pressed the heel of her hand to her sternum. She remembered Daniel's voice in the lobby, dry, iron-edged, unbegging. Before I made light. Cakes. Bread. Some mistakes you can eat. Her father had always loved that kind of line, the sort that pretended to be about pastry and was really about staying human when the world tried to sand your corners off. At 9:12, the landline rang. Only 3 people used it, her mother, the family lawyer, the Foundation's archivist. She snatched it up. It's Marjorie, said a warm, capable voice, the sound of good libraries. Evan said you're digging for a Hale. I am, Clara said. I don't want to spook the past. Spooks don't work here, Marjorie said. Paper rustled. We have an oral history from a Sergeant William Hale recorded in '98 at a VFW hall in Lowell. He mentions a Rhodes. He calls him Ricky, which I assume would make your father roll his eyes. Clara smiled into her palm. It would. Her voice went smoky. May I hear it? I can send a file, Marjorie said. But there's a transcript here and a paragraph you should have in your hands tonight. Keys tapped. Let me read you the line. Clara held herself very still. There's a captain, Rhodes, big shoulders, bigger stubbornness. We pulled him out of a bad patch. He kept saying he owed me his life. I told him to bake me a cake when peace got noisy again. Marjorie stopped. The silence had edges and light. I'll need the file. Clara said the words careful as glass. All of it. First thing. You'll have it, Marjorie said. Ms. Rhodes, some people repay debt with money. Some repay it by remembering, or by refusing to forget, Clara said. She hung up and stood restless with the precise anxiety that only arrives when a plan decides it wants to be born. She paced to the window and watched the city put on its string of lamps. In apartments across from hers, lives practiced being ordinary with an excellence that has never made a magazine cover. A man reheated soup. A girl tried the same cartwheel twice. Somebody in a yellow kitchen danced alone. Her phone buzzed again. Evan Roster confirms a sergeant. William Hale served with your father. Same battalion, same months. 2 commendations. A Purple Heart and a grin you can hear on paper. A beat later, also security logs show today's visitor introduced himself as Daniel Hale. He added as if apologizing, Henderson didn't give me that. You were standing there when he said his name. I was, she whispered. I was. Heat rose up her spine the way resolve does when it stops pretending it's just curiosity. She crossed to the desk, pulled a note card from a drawer, and uncapped a fountain pen that only behaved for serious sentences. Mr. Hale, she wrote, yesterday wasn't charity. Today isn't either. If you're willing, I'd like to buy you a coffee and ask you a question that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with bread. C. Roads. She stared at the line, then added under it, P.S. I don't know your father's first name, but I know a line of ink in a journal that has carried mine for years. If this is too much too soon, ignore me. I will respect the silence. She sealed the card, slid it into an envelope, printed his name with the formality you give to the other half of a bridge you're praying will hold. How to get it to him without turning a thank you into a headline. She pictured Henderson's soft eyes and absolute rules. DeLuca's bell and Anna's cheeks dusted in powdered sugar. The bakery had begun this. Let it keep custody. Clara shrugged back into her coat, grabbed the journal, the envelope, and her common sense. The elevator hummed. In the lobby, Henderson looked up. Evening, ma'am. Officer Henderson, she said, and placed the envelope on the counter. If a Mr. Daniel Hale happens to leave anything for a neighbor, please do me a favor and never tell a soul I tried to return the courtesy. Henderson smiled without parting his lips. Yes, ma'am. Outside, the cold lifted her hair like a blessing. She walked the 8 blocks to DeLuca's because some messages don't belong in a courier's bag. They belong in your own 2 hands. The bell gave away her entrance. Anna looked up, surprise rising and smoothing into welcome. Mr. DeLuca straightened as if a health inspector had walked in with a halo. Ms. Rhodes Anna said, What can we get you an errand? Clara said, simply sliding the envelope across. For Mr. Hale. He may come by tomorrow. If he does, give him this. If he doesn't, please call the number on the back and I'll send directions for a quieter route. Anna rested her fingers on the paper as if feeling the temperature of a story. We'll make sure it lands, she said. Clara hesitated. Yesterday. The cake. Thank you for how you handled it. Anna's smile tilted. Thank you for how you didn't. Back on the sidewalk, Clara pulled her coat tighter. The city was a soft machine exhaling steam from manholes like a dragon learning manners. She thought of a line from the transcript she hadn't heard yet, but already loved Bake Me a Cake when peace gets noisy again. I can do that, she said to the cold air. I can make room for warmth. She looked up, saw her reflection layered onto the pharmacy window, a woman people called Ice because it's easier than saying she refuses to waste heat. She touched the journal in her bag. Hale, not a coincidence. A chord the past had struck so the present would learn the tune. Clara turned toward home with a decision shoulders could lean on. Tomorrow she would invite Daniel to coffee, not as a benefactor to a beneficiary, but as a daughter to a son. 2 lives braided by a promise written in a field where dessert had been postponed. Some debts of honor don't accrue interest, they accrue character. Some names are bridges. You don't notice you've been crossing until you look back and see the river you didn't fall into. Remember the name Hale her father had written. I do, she whispered, and I will. Before we start, Daniel said, I need you to know I'm not for sale. The diner's neon signed its name in the window like a tired autograph. Saturday, late morning. Coffee steamed in squat white cups. A waitress in pink sneakers hummed Aretha under her breath as if air needed a backbone. Across from Daniel, in a booth that had never hosted a board meeting, sat Clara Rhodes' winter white coat, traded for a navy sweater that made her look less like a headline and more like a decision waiting to be spoken out loud. I didn't come to buy you, she replied. I came to borrow some of your heat. My heat? You said once you used to make light, she said. I'd like to talk about turning on a few ovens. Silence took the seat between them and adjusted its napkin. Maggie sat beside Daniel, swinging her legs, coloring a dragon that breathed confetti. When the waitress slid a hot chocolate in front of her, Maggie whispered, Thank you, ma'am, so earnestly the whole booth felt better. I asked you here, Clara continued, because yesterday I learned something about the world that embarrassed me. My company sells comfort, Daniel, but we ration it like it's a luxury. I want to start a pilot, a community bakery. Low-cost bread training for folks who need a second try, a place where heat fixes what cold broke. Bread doesn't save people, Daniel said. No, she agreed. People save people. Bread just makes room for the saving to happen. Maggie looked up. Is this a job for my dad, or a present for strangers? Clara turned to her with a seriousness children understand. It's a job for your dad that turns into a present for strangers. Daniel's eyes narrowed. You talk like you've done this pitch in rooms where the chairs cost more than my rent. I have, she said. A beat. Those rooms don't smell like coffee. That's their weakness. He tried not to smile. The waitress set down a plate of pancakes in the shape of optimism. Maggie cut a triangle, then paused. If a bakery makes light, she asked, does it also make birthdays? It makes Tuesdays less lonely, Clara said. Birthdays, it can handle too. Daniel set down his fork. Miss Rhodes. Clara, she said. Clara, I appreciate the poetry, but I don't do ribbon cuttings. I don't show up for a photo where a billionaire hands a broke man a whisk and the world claps for a minute. You think I want your face, she said, when what I need is your craft. Craft doesn't pay bills if it's pinned to your PR wall. She didn't flinch. Contracts do, she said simply, and slid a folder from her bag like a magician producing a very responsible dove. Salary benefits a training budget that would make you brave. You pick the flour, the ovens, the recipes, the apprentices. We pilot in a closed storefront I own on Maple and 3rd the old laundromat. We partner with St. Bridget's Shelter for trainees and with the food bank for day-olds. We sell bread cheap. We sell fancy to the people who can afford fancy and let that margin carry the rest. Daniel kept his hands folded. And when your board sees a line item that doesn't speak fluent profit, I'll translate, she said. They pay me for that. He studied her like a mixing bowl he wasn't sure could hold. What do you want from me besides bread? The name of the first loaf, she said without smile or wink. And your rules printed big enough to read from the street. Rules he echoed. Yours, not mine, she said. What dignity looks like when it clocks in. Maggie whispered to her dragon. I think she's serious. Oh, I'm very serious, Clara said to the dragon, which accepted the news with grace. Daniel took the folder. The paper had a pleasant weight. He scanned. The numbers were honest and not insulting. The time horizon was 6 months with a renewal option and a clause that read like a promise. All trainees receive stipends. No unpaid halos. He glanced up. You wrote this, he said. I wrote what I could afford to mean. He closed the folder. I still don't want charity. Neither do I, she said. Charity's a press release with a bow tie. This is work. The waitress refilled their cups. You two look like you're building a bridge, she observed. Try a slice of pie. Bridges hold better with sugar. 2 forks, Maggie requested, diplomatic to the bone. While the waitress cut the pie, Clara reached into her bag and carefully placed a wrapped rectangular thing on the table, plain brown paper tied with string. For Maggie, she said. If it's overstepping, I'll take it back and call it a mistake I learned from. Maggie looked to Daniel. He nodded once. She untied the string the way you untie a friendship bracelet. Inside a thick sketchbook, the good kind with tooth to the pages, a small tin of colored pencils, a row of stickers shaped like tiny crowns. Clara cleared her throat. When I was little, she said, my dad told me the world listens harder if you draw it first. He said, make room on paper. The room will come later. I thought maybe you'd like to draw the cakes before they show up. Maggie traced the edge of the cover. Is this for practicing wishes? It's for making them detailed, Clara said. The universe respects specifics. Daniel stared at the gift. It did not smell like pity. It smelled like invitation with a return address. He turned it once in his hands, then slid it back to Maggie. Say, thank you like you mean it, he said, but his voice had to go around something in his throat to get out. Thank you like I mean it, Maggie said to Clara, solemn as a judge, then broke into light. I'll draw Tuesdays. Clara smiled, and it fit her face better than armor. "Draw bread I haven't tasted yet," she said. "Then I'll make sure there's an oven that can catch up." The pie arrived. It disappeared, which is what good pie does when a decision is circling the table like a bird looking for a landing. "Take me to the space," Daniel said. Maple and Third had been a coming-soon corner for 8 years, the kind where hope got stapled to plywood and then weathered into apology. The laundromat's letters still ghosted the glass easy spin. Inside the room was stripped to concrete a ribcage of exposed beams and stubborn dust. Clara unlocked the grate, disarmed the security, and pushed open the door. The emptiness rushed to meet them. "Smells like lost chances," Daniel said. "Or room," Clara replied. They walked the length of it. Maggie's sneakers made polite squeaks. Daniel knelt and pressed his palm to the floor as if checking fever. He stood and measured the wall with his stride. "Ovens there," he said to no one, "and the future." 3 deck stone soles. Proofers back left where the building pretends to be warm. Workbench along this line, maple, not stainless. Stainless makes people feel like mistakes echo. Clara took notes without being asked. "Display case low," he said, "so kids see first." "Signage hand-painted," he said. "If we print it too clean, people with dirty hands won't come." Maggie wandered to the front window and held up the sketchbook like a holy text toward the street. "I'm showing the block we're ready," she explained. Clara tapped a spot on the floor with the end of her pen. "Community table here," she said. "No Wi-Fi. People forget how to sit if the room lets them scroll." "You want to fight?" Daniel asked. "I want bread to win," she said. "Small battles accumulate." He walked to the back, opened a rusted service door, and stepped into the alley. Cold came shouldering in. He looked up the brick to where a crooked gutter offered a stubborn leak, then down to the drain that would need to be taught a better attitude. He came back in and faced the room as if it had just introduced itself and he was deciding whether to trust it. "Here's my condition," he said. Clara set the pen down as if you receive conditions with your hands empty on purpose. "Name it." "This cannot be your charity lab," he said. "No staged pity. No ribbon cutting where I pretend to receive my life from you. If we do this, it's because the neighborhood deserves a good crust and a place to learn a trade that doesn't vanish with the next app update." "Agreed," she said. "And trainees get paid from day one," he added. "Stipend's not a favor. It's a line item that keeps the lights respectful." "Already in the contract," she said. "One more," he said. "When a man comes in counting quarters and holding his breath, no one behind the counter makes that breath cost more." Clara nodded once something bright moving behind her eyes. "I'll stencil it on the wall." He hesitated. "Don't." "Why not?" "Because the right rules live in muscle memory," he said. "Put it in the training. Put it in the way the room greets people." Clara inhaled. "You're hired, Mr. Hale." "I haven't said yes," he said. "You will," she replied, not arrogant, just certain in the way a compass is certain. He looked at Maggie, who was now drawing a loaf shaped like a cloud wearing boots. He looked at the room and heard the old hum of ovens that weren't there yet. He looked at Clara, who for a woman famous for being made of ice kept setting warm things between people and letting them decide what to do next. "Fine," he said. "But on one condition that outranks the others." "You said one more, 2 conditions ago," she said, and he almost laughed. "This is the one I mean," he said. "This is not charity. This is work. My work." Clara extended her hand. "Then let's go to work." He took it. Her grip was dry and steady, the handshake of a person who expects things to hold. A beat later, he released and walked to the window where Maggie stood staking out her kingdom. He knelt. "What are you drawing?" "Our first bread," she said. "It's called Tuesday." "That's a ridiculous name," he said, smiling. "It's a perfect name," Clara said from behind them. "Tuesdays are when people need proof something is happening." Daniel stood and faced the room one more time. He ran the tape measure from his pocket along the wall, reading numbers out loud the way a man reads prayers when he doesn't want to startle them. He stopped where the counter would end. "Do you want glossy or matte paint?" Clara asked Reddy with pen. "Eggshell," he said. "Forgives fingerprints without pretending people never touched it." "Eggshell it is." The door banged suddenly. A figure swept in on a breeze that didn't wait for permission. Penelope Cole, sharp, elegant, a suit. The color of perfect contempt, looked around as if she'd been personally offended by the square footage. "There you are," she said to Clara, ignoring Daniel and Maggie as efficiently as a tax code. "The board deck for Monday. Evan said you were touring a laundromat." "Hi, Penelope," Clara said. "We're building a bakery." Penelope's smile carried a lawyer in its pocket. "Of course you are. I brought suggestions regarding your pilot. Primarily, don't." Daniel stepped forward without meaning to. "Some of us are busy," he said. "We can ignore you standing still just fine." Penelope blinked as if surprised the furniture talked. "And you are?" "The baker," he said. "The man who will teach this room to be warm." She glanced at Maggie's sketchbook, at Clara's pen, at the contract in Daniel's hand. "This is quaint," she said. "Tell me, Clara, how many loaves make a quarter's worth of shareholder patience?" "Enough," Clara said. "Math says otherwise," Penelope replied. "Then we'll teach math some manners," Clara said. Penelope's eyes cooled. "Bored. Monday. Be ready to defend your hobby." She pivoted on a heel and left the air rearranged behind her. The door shuddered. Silence looked around, decided it didn't owe Penelope rent, and sat back down. "You're going to have a fight," Daniel said. Clara's jaw set. "I've had worse," she said. Maggie lifted her drawing chin high. "Excuse me," she told the air where Penelope had been. "We're busy making Tuesdays." Daniel looked at Clara. Something like a grin escaped him, sharp and grateful. "We start with the floors," he said. No one trusts a room with tired feet. "Floors Monday," Clara said, checking her calendar like she'd just penciled in a necessary rebellion. "Ovens by Friday, if supply behaves." He nodded. "Bring a sledgehammer," he said. "Some walls think they live here. They don't." Clara closed her notebook. "Mr. Hale," she said, "I promise you this, we will not perform kindness. We will practice it." He slipped the contract back into the folder. "Good," he said. "Performance ends when the clapping does." She held his gaze. "And practice keeps the ovens warm," he said. They stood there, woman with a penman, with a tape-measure child with a crown of pencils at the edge of a room that had no idea how lucky it was about to get. Outside, a bus rolled by like a long, low amen. Inside, a future took a breath. The boardroom at Rhodes Foods had a way of making people feel smaller than their ideas. The table was glossy enough to insist on reflections. The skyline pressed its nose to the glass like a curious child. Coffee steamed from cups that cost more than some rents. Clara stood at the head spine, a line you could set your watch by hands resting on a stack of paper that wasn't there to be pretty. "Let's begin," she said. CFO Martin Howe adjusted his glasses like a man about to apologize with numbers. Agenda Item 3. Community Bakery Pilot. Current projection negative margin in the first 2 quarters, break even. Uncertain. Brand dilution risk, moderate to high. Translation. Penelope Cole said, "Crossing her legs, we spend money to look humble." A low ripple of polite laughter traveled the length of the table and died when it reached Clara. Or, Clara said, "We invest in a place where our brand touches something warmer than a shelf." Penelope's smile didn't reach anything that mattered. "We are not a church, Clara. We are a consumer goods company with premium positioning. We sell aspiration, not absolution. We sell food," Clara said. "People eat it in kitchens with bills on the counter and birthdays on the calendar they can't always afford to keep. If we can't show our face on Maple and 3rd without a chaperone, our positioning is already broken." Martin clicked to a slide. Graphs glowed. Cash cost. Legal flagged health code exposure. PR flagged expectations management. Shareholder relations suggests a pause until we can better narrate the benefits. Penelope leaned forward, voice sugared and sharp. "I move to suspend the pilot pending a committee review. We will reconvene with a refined plan. Or not at all." A director cleared his throat. "Second." Clara felt the room tilt. She didn't reach for the table. "Before you vote to put this in a drawer," she said, "you should know there's a listening session this afternoon at St. Bridget's. We invited the neighborhood. If we intend to serve them, we can at least hear them." Penelope's brows climbed. "Ah, a pageant. A practice," Clara said. "People first slide deck later." Penelope's smile turned private. "And if the people boo, what then? Do we put it in the ad Rhodes Foods booed but trying?" Clara let the silence sit beside Penelope until it got bored. "If they boo," she said quietly, "we will have earned a truth we can use." A murmur, a shifting of papers. The chair lifted his pen. "Motion on the floor, suspend the pilot pending review." "Table it," Clara said. "Give me one afternoon. Hear the room, hear itself." Penelope's eyes glittered. "What are you afraid of, Clara? That your little oven will go cold before it ever warms a brand?" Clara met the stare that had felled less principled things. "I'm afraid of us forgetting why anyone ever trusted our label." The chair cleared his throat. Motion to table until post-listening session. All in favor, hands went up enough. Penelope's didn't. She smiled as if victory had merely rescheduled itself. "Enjoy your pageant." Clara gathered her papers as if they were a shield she refused to use. "I'll enjoy the truth," she said. "I recommend you try it." St. Bridget's Parish Hall smelled like coffee and community a hum of folding chairs, a bulletin board of lost cats, and found courage. A plastic banner read, "Listening Session," in letters printed big enough for the shy. Volunteers laid out cookies the size of second chances. Reporters drifted at the edges like cats waiting for a sound worth chasing. Evan leaned in. Cameras from 3 local stations. A blogger with teeth. Martin is here to look responsible. Penelope sent an assistant to take notes like subpoenas. Clara's eyes scanned the room for one man and one paper crown. The man arrived with wind on his coat and his daughter's hand in his. Daniel nodded at her, once soldier to soldier. Maggie waved solemn like royalty acknowledging foreign dignitaries. The moderator, a woman from the neighborhood council with a voice that could settle a schoolyard, tapped the mic. "We're here to talk, not to audition for arguments. Ms. Rhodes, you asked to listen. Floor's yours." Clara stepped up. She didn't bring slides or slogans. "I run a company with a good story," she began. "But a good story isn't the same as a good neighbor. We're proposing a community bakery at Maple and third affordable bread paid training a room where heat can fix what cold broke. We're here to hear what you need, not to tell you what you should want." A man in a Mets hat spoke first. "I need rents to stop lying. You got a bread for that soft laughter not unkind." Clara nodded. "Bread can't fix leases, but it can keep a kid full at school and a mother proud at dinner. It can hire a teenager who thinks the only thing he has to sell is trouble." An older woman stood thin hands shaking with a dignity that refused to. "I bury more neighbors than I welcome. We could use a place for birthdays that doesn't ask us to pretend we're richer than we are." A tall teen raised his chin. "Will you pay us to learn, or do we volunteer so your PR looks good?" Pay, Clara said without flinch. Day 1. No halos. Reporters looked up. Pens scratched. A camera's red light winked alive. Penelope's assistant typed like he was building a case. Then a voice at the back cleared the room. "I've got something," it said. Daniel stepped forward, Maggie's hand slipping free so his could be his. He didn't go to the mic. He didn't need it. "I count quarters like prayers," he said. "Some days they don't add up to a candle. 2 days ago, someone in a bakery did a quiet thing. Yesterday, I shook hands with a woman in a white coat in a lobby that teaches men to forget what rooms are for." A breathless stillness. Reporters leaned in. Daniel's eyes found Clara's, then turned to the room so he could tell them the truth he owed them. "Listen to me. Bread isn't profit. It's memory. It's family. It's a Tuesday that didn't collapse under its own weight. And if you treat it like a brand strategy, you will kill the part of us that keeps the rest of us standing. It wasn't a shout. It was a verdict. The words lifted, struck the beams, and came back warm. A woman near the front clapped once hard, then another. Then, all at once, the kind of applause that doesn't flatter it agrees. A reporter called out, "Sir, your name, Daniel Hale," he said. "I'll be the one teaching ovens how to keep their promises. If they let me." Martin whispered to Evan, alarm masquerading as professionalism. "We did not approve a spokesperson." Evan didn't look away from the room. Sometimes a spokesperson approves himself. The moderator smiled into the mic. Anyone else, a dozen hands. A man who ran a youth center. A grandmother who headed a block watch. A nurse from the clinic who said she needed a place to send her patients when medicine could only go so far. Each story added a floor to a building that was already there, you just couldn't see it until people spoke. When the questions turned to details, Clara answered simply. Stipends. No unpaid labor. No luxury price point at the front door and shame at the back. We will hire locally. We will listen like it's a skill. We will fail small and correct fast. Who owns it? Someone asked. We do. Clara said, then touched her own chest. And so do I. Ownership means responsibility that doesn't sleep. Penelope's assistant stood smiling the way you smile when you plan to wash your hands of something. And when the quarter ends and the numbers hurt your feelings, Daniel turned to him flat and calm. Then we teach the quarter some context. A ripple of laughter broke into relief. Last question, the moderator said. How soon? Clara glanced at Daniel. He didn't nod. He weighted the air toward yes. We started yesterday, she said. We'll open when the floors know their floors and the ovens know their home. Outside, microphones sprouted like dandelions. The cold turned everyone's breath into speech bubbles. A news anchor with careful hair slid in front of Clara. Ms. Rhodes, this is a departure from Rhodes Foods' usual premium strategy. Why now? Because premium without purpose is just price, Clara said, and the world is done paying extra for emptiness. Is this a response to criticism that Rhodes is out of touch? It's a response to a neighborhood asking for bread instead of marketing, she said. Another reporter pivoted lens hunting Daniel. Mr. Hale, your line inside bread isn't profit, that's viral already. Care to elaborate? Daniel glanced at the camera at the people behind it at Maggie holding Miss Ortiz's hand. Profit is a receipt, he said. Bread is a reason. The clip would be replayed on the hour. For now, it just drifted up into the evening like a small stubborn kite. Evan's phone vibrated against his palm like a trapped moth. He glanced down, winced, handed it to Clara. Board group thread. Contain this. Share price dipping. 0.8% intraday. Penelope wants emergency session. Another text from Marjorie at the foundation. Your father would have said, bake first, brief later. How bad? Daniel asked. Clara watched a push alert bloom on a reporter's screen. Ice Queen melts Rhodes, pilot ignites debate, and felt the old useless urge to control the weather. She breathed instead. Bad enough for a story, she said. Good enough for a fight. Penelope emerged from the crowd like a knife slipped into a pocket that wasn't expecting it. Congratulations, she said to Clara. You went from CEO to folk hero in under an hour. The market is unimpressed. The market can meet us at the bakery, Clara said. We'll teach it manners. Penelope's smile sharpened. Emergency board at 8. Bring your oven mitts. She left with her assistant, trailing already on a call that was probably more threat than question. Daniel touched Clara's sleeve, a brief permission. You don't owe me this, he said. If they shut it down, say the word, and I'll find another flame. Clara shook her head. No. We owe a debt I intend to pay. To who? He asked. To a man who pulled my father from fire, she said without blinking. To a girl who believes crowns can come from cereal boxes. To a city that deserves a room where warmth isn't a rumor. For a second, just a second, the noise thinned, and the night made room for that sentence to land. Then everything rushed back, sirens far off, the scrape of a chair, the sound of people deciding to go home, believing in something small enough to carry. "Go fix your floors," Clara said. "I'll go set my table on fire." "That's not how tables work," Daniel said. "It is tonight," she answered and almost smiled. At 7:58, the board reassembled with faces that looked like winter-learning sarcasm. Penelope moved to revoke the pilot entirely. Martin fussed over a chart that pretended context was a luxury. Clara let them talk until their arguments collapsed under their own repetition. Then she spoke, voice low and edged. "You are not voting on a line item," she said. "You are voting on whether Rhodes Foods gets to be proud of its name 10 years from now." "Pride doesn't keep lights on," Penelope snapped. "No," Clara said, "but people do. And today, the people told us what they need. If we punish them for using the voice we ask them to use, we are not leaders. We're landlords." Silence, the expensive kind, fell. The chair rubbed his temple. "Compromise," he said. 1 month. No ribbon cutting, no press. If it bleeds, cash, it dies. Penelope opened her mouth. Clara beat her to the air. 1 month, she said. But we will not perform kindness. We will practice it. And if you want to bet against bread in a neighborhood that's still standing, place your wager out loud so I can introduce you to the people who'll collect. A vote. Hands. The motion to revoke failed by 1. The pilot survived by the same. When the room emptied, Clara stood alone at the window and watched the city forget to be cynical for a moment at a time. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel Flores started at 7. "Bring a sledgehammer," she typed back. "I'll bring coffee and a lawyer." He replied, "Bring nails. I've got the law I need." Clara slid the phone into her pocket, picked up her coat, and spoke to the room that had tried to make her small. "Fire belongs in ovens," she said quietly. "Let's keep it there." Outside, the night took her breath and turned it into a promise. Tomorrow floors, then proofing, then light. The bakery smelled of hope and unfinished wood. Fresh paint still clung to the walls, and the floors Daniel had sanded with his own hands glowed under the soft bulbs strung across the ceiling. Outside, Maple and Third was alive with voices, footsteps, and a restless kind of anticipation. It was Clara's idea to call it a festival, though she'd confessed to Daniel in private. It's less a festival, more a prayer. We need the city to see what warmth looks like when it refuses to be silenced. Now, on a brisk evening that felt borrowed from December, strings of paper lanterns swayed in the wind. Volunteers had lined the sidewalks with jars holding small candles, their flicker pooling golden across the cracked pavement. The air carried the scent of sugar cinnamon and something older, like the kind of bread a grandmother would cut into thick slices so no one left her table hungry. Inside, Daniel stood at the long maple counter. His apron was dusted in flour, his sleeves rolled to his elbows, and his hands moved with the kind of muscle memory that came from a life he thought he'd buried. Every movement was steady, unhurried, reverent. For the first time in years, he was not just baking bread. He was reviving a part of himself that had been smothered by grief. Maggie perched on a stool, carefully pressing crown-shaped stickers onto paper bags. She hummed a tune, something she had learned at school, but softened it into a lullaby that wrapped the room in quiet courage. Clara moved among volunteers, her sharp posture softened by the glow of the lanterns. She no longer looked like the ice queen splashed across business magazines. Tonight, she looked like a woman keeping a promise not to her board, but to herself. "Daniel," she said, stepping to the counter. "Are you ready?" He looked at her, then at Maggie, then at the baskets of loaves cooling beside him. He wiped his hands on his apron and spoke in a voice that trembled only once. "Ready as I'll ever be." The doors opened and neighbors poured in. Families with children, elderly men in worn coats, teenagers in hoodies, nurses in scrubs, and even a few reporters clutching notepads. The room filled with laughter greetings and the shuffle of feet eager to belong somewhere. Maggie hopped down from her stool. "Daddy, can I light them now?" she whispered. Daniel nodded. She carried a box of small candles to the counter and with Clara's help began lighting them one by one. Soon, the entire bakery glowed with dozens of tiny flames, each one mirrored in the glass of the front windows. The effect was simple and stunning. A hush fell over the crowd. For a moment, the city outside seemed to lean in listening. Daniel stepped forward, a warm loaf in his hands. "This isn't charity," he said, his voice carrying steady over the silence. "This is a table for everyone. Bread that remembers. Bread that forgives. Bread that refuses to keep count." The crowd broke into applause, not polite, but fierce, like people who'd been waiting too long for something they didn't know how to name. Clara watched him speak, and for the first time she felt the weight of her own armor slipping. It wasn't weakness. It was release. Her father's words in the journal echoed, "Remember the name Hale." Tonight the city was doing just that. But not everyone came to celebrate. Near the back of the room, a whisper began. It passed from ear to ear, low and sharp, until it reached a cluster of reporters who pricked up like hounds. A man in a tailored suit sent by Penelope Cole stepped forward. His voice sliced through the golden hush. "Tell me, Mr. Hale," he called out. "Is it true you've been taking money from Ms. Rhodes under the table? Is this bakery just another stunt so she can polish her reputation?" The room stiffened. The warmth faltered like a flame catching in the wind. Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't answer immediately. Maggie clutched his apron, her eyes wide. "Answer the question." The man pressed his smirk, rehearsed. "How much is your dignity worth?" "A paycheck." "A loaf." Clara stepped forward, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. "That's enough." But the man didn't back down. Or maybe this is just a romance story for the press and Ice Queen softening for a charity case. Makes a good headline, doesn't it? The crowd stirred. Reporters scribbled furiously. Neighbors exchanged nervous glances. Daniel felt Maggie's small hand squeeze his. He looked down at her, then back at the crowd. His voice, when it came, was low, but strong. "I told her, once this is not charity. This is work. My work. You want proof." He lifted a loaf of bread, steam rising like incense. "Taste this. Tell me if it tastes like pity." A woman near the front stepped forward, took the loaf, tore a piece, and tasted it. Her eyes brimmed with tears. "Tastes like my mother's kitchen," she whispered. "Tastes like coming home." The crowd erupted in applause again, stronger this time, angry at the attempt to poison the night. Clara moved to Daniel's side. She didn't need to speak. Her presence was its own defiance. Together they stood under the candlelight facing the crowd that now rallied around them. Later, as the hall began to empty and volunteers cleared tables, Clara stepped outside for air. The night was crisp and the lanterns swayed gently above Maple and 3rd. She looked up at the glowing bakery windows at Daniel inside, bending to help Maggie tie her shoelaces. For once, the sight warmed her more than the city lights ever had. Evan approached quietly. "The press will run with the accusations," he warned. "Penelope won't stop." Clara didn't look away from the window. "Then we'll give them something louder than lies," she said. "We'll give them light." Inside, Maggie lit the last candle, her small hands careful and sure. Daniel kissed the top of her head, and for that moment the world felt whole again. The bakery was no longer just a room with ovens. It was a heartbeat steady and defiant, daring the dark to try again. And outside, the city knew something had begun on Maple and 3rd that no rumor could smother. The bakery's candles had burned down to small pools of wax, but the heat of the rumors lingered long after the Festival of Light ended. What had begun as whispers in the back of the room spread into headlines by morning. Ice Queen's pet project community. Bakery or publicity stunt. Widowed father tied to CEO's private agenda. The words cut sharper than knives. Daniel read them on his neighbor's folded newspaper outside the apartment building, Maggie clutching his hand. The little girl only noticed the picture, him standing with Clara under the lanterns, her small voice chirping, "Daddy, look, you're famous." He couldn't bring himself to smile. At Rhodes Foods headquarters, Clara sat in a glass-walled office that suddenly felt more like a cage. Penelope Cole's voice echoed in her mind from the emergency board meeting that morning. "Face it, Clara, you've lost control of the narrative. You've traded our reputation for a street corner fairy tale and a man who knows nothing about our world." How much longer before this blows up in your face? Clara had not flinched. But when the boardroom emptied, she sank into her chair and stared at her father's journal. The inked words, "If I don't return, remember the name Hale." She whispered to herself, "I remembered father. But how do I keep him from breaking?" That evening, Daniel arrived at the bakery late. Shoulders stooped Maggie, skipping a step behind him. Clara was waiting, her posture erect, but her eyes betraying exhaustion. "We need to talk," he said. Her reply was clipped. "Yes, we do." He glanced around the bakery, the tables stacked, the lanterns extinguished. This was supposed to help people. Now my daughter's picture is in papers like she's part of some circus. Clara folded her arms. "And you think I wanted this? You think I orchestrated the tabloids? I think," Daniel said, voice rising, "you live in a world where damage is a number, and my little girl is just another headline." A silence followed sharp enough to pierce bone. Maggie looked up at both of them, her brow furrowed. Clara's voice softened, almost breaking. "Daniel, I didn't do this to make you a pawn. I did it because—" She stopped, searching his face. "Because I saw you, and I couldn't look away." But Daniel shook his head. "Seeing me is one thing. Protecting Maggie from this storm is another. I can't let her be collateral damage." His words landed like a gavel. Clara felt her throat tighten. For the first time in years, she had no clever rebuttal, no cold mask. She was simply human. Daniel took Maggie's hand. "We're done here." The night air outside was colder than before. Daniel walked fast, Maggie's small legs trotting to keep up. He could feel her gaze on him, could hear the question she was afraid to ask. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Finally, did we do something wrong?" The weight of it stopped him in his tracks. He knelt down, pulling her into his arms. "No, sweetheart. You did everything right. It's the grown-ups who can't seem to get it right." Her little fingers touched his cheek, brushing away a tear he didn't know had fallen. The next evening, the community center invited the bakery team to a small gathering. Daniel hesitated, but Maggie begged, "Please, Daddy, just one more time." Inside the hall, neighbors milled about uneasily, aware of the gossip, but unwilling to abandon the hope the bakery had lit in them. Daniel stayed in the back, Maggie perched on a chair. Clara was there too, but they didn't speak. When the moderator announced the evening would close with a word from our youngest supporter, everyone looked confused until Maggie toddled toward the stage, clutching a handmade card. Daniel's heart stopped. "Maggie, wait." But the microphone was already lowered to her height. Her voice, high and trembling, filled the hall. "I wanted to say thank you, because last week my daddy had a birthday, and he didn't tell anyone, not even Miss Clara." She glanced shyly at Clara, then back to the crowd. "So, I want to sing him a birthday song, because everyone deserves cake." The room fell into a silence so deep it hurt. Then, with a courage only children know, Maggie began to sing. "Happy birthday to you." Her tiny voice cracked on the notes, but it carried weight greater than any boardroom speech. By the second line, people in the hall were joining in. By the last line, the entire room swelled with the chorus voices trembling with tears. Daniel stood frozen, his hands over his mouth. Clara's eyes blurred with emotion as she whispered, "My God." When the song ended, Maggie clapped her hands and shouted, "Make a wish." Daddy Daniel stepped forward, pulling her into his arms. His whisper carried through the hall. "My only wish is that you never forget how loved you are." The crowd erupted in applause, louder, truer, unstoppable. Clara walked to the stage, her heels striking like drums. She faced the room, her voice clear and fierce. "This is not charity. This is not a stunt. This is a debt of honor my family owes his." She turned to Daniel, her gaze unwavering. "And I will not let anyone board or paper tear that down." Her words hung in the air, breaking through the fog of doubt like sunlight through stained glass. For the first time, Daniel saw not the Ice Queen, not the billionaire, but a woman willing to risk everything to honor both past and present. And in that hall, with the echo of a little girl's song still trembling in the rafters, something shifted. The story was no longer about rumors. It was about truth. And truth had a way of silencing the dark. The boardroom was colder than any winter night Daniel had ever known. Polished mahogany stretched across the center like a battlefield, its glossy surface reflecting the tense faces of Rhodes Food's most powerful voices. Cameras lined the back wall. Journalists had been invited under the guise of transparency. But everyone knew this was no ordinary meeting. This was a trial. Penelope Cole sat near the head of the table, her smile sharp as a blade. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice velvet with venom. "We are here to address a breach of trust. Our CEO has funneled corporate resources into a pet project benefiting a single individual, Daniel Hale. A janitor, a widower, a man with no qualifications to lead any initiative." Reporters scribbled eagerly, eyes darting between Clara and Daniel. Clara sat perfectly still, her back straight, her hands folded. She looked every inch the Ice Queen again, but inside her chest a storm raged. Daniel sat beside her, his jaw-set fingers clenching around the worn edge of the chair. Penelope leaned forward. "The question is simple. Is Rhodes Foods a company, or is it Clara Rhodes' personal charity fund?" A murmur rippled through the room. The trap had been laid, and Penelope's confidence glittered. Then Clara rose to her feet. Her heels echoed against the floor like a gavel calling the court to order. She didn't look at Penelope. She looked at the cameras, at the reporters, at the silent men and women who had been trained to see numbers instead of names. "You call this charity," Clara said, her voice steady, "but it is something else entirely." She lifted a small leather-bound journal from the table, the edges frayed with age's legacy. Gasps fluttered through the room. Penelope's smirk faltered. Clara opened the journal with careful hands. "This belonged to my father, Colonel Richard Rhodes. In his final entries written during the war, he described a young soldier who saved his life. That soldier's name was Samuel Hale." Every eye turned toward Daniel. He felt the weight of the room press on his shoulders, but he did not look away. Clara's voice softened, but it carried through the hall with the clarity of a bell. "My father wrote, 'If I do not return, remember the name Hale, because every breath I take beyond this battle is borrowed from him.'" She turned the book so the cameras could see the faded ink, the trembling handwriting of a man who had seen too much death and clung to one truth. Daniel closed his eyes. He remembered his father's stories, the fragments of war his old man rarely spoke of. Tonight the fragments became whole. "This project is not about pity," Clara continued. "It is not about profit. It is about a debt owed, a debt of honor that has waited 70 years to be repaid. Daniel Hale is not a recipient of charity. He is the heir to sacrifice. He carries his father's blood, the man who carried mine to safety." The room fell into silence so complete it was as though time itself had bowed its head. Then Clara placed photographs on the table, a black and white shot of two young soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder, Richard Rhodes and Samuel Hale. Next, a medal dulled by age but unmistakably real. And finally a letter, her father's commendation with Samuel Hale's name etched into the record. Reporters stopped scribbling. They were staring. Daniel rose slowly, his voice rough but unshaken. "My father never wanted thanks. He used to say, 'You don't measure a man by the medals on his chest, but by the bread he shares at his table.' He died with calloused hands, not headlines. But tonight?" He paused, glancing at Maggie's picture tucked inside his wallet. "Tonight, maybe he can rest, knowing his sacrifice wasn't forgotten." The words broke the dam. A ripple of applause started from the journalists, unheard of in that setting. then spread to the board members themselves. Cameras flashed not in scandal, but in reverence. Penelope's face drained of color. Her carefully built accusation crumbled like stale bread. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. This doesn't change the facts. The bakery, Clara cut her off, her tone like steel wrapped in silk. The bakery is no longer a project. It is a promise. From this day forward, Rhodes Foods will establish the Legacy Program, dedicated to honoring the families of veterans through training opportunity and dignity. The board can either stand in the way of honor or walk beside it. The choice is yours. One by one, board members nodded, not reluctantly, not politically, with conviction. The vote was unanimous. The Legacy Program was born. Penelope gathered her files with trembling hands. She rose, muttered something about reconsidering her position, and walked out. No one stopped her. As the cameras rolled, Clara turned to Daniel. For the first time, she allowed the world to see her without the mask. Her eyes glistened, her lips trembled with the weight of unshed words. "Your father saved mine," she whispered, audible only to him. "And now maybe I can save something for you." Daniel shook his head gently. "You've already done more than that. You've given Maggie a future. You've given me hope." For a long moment, neither moved. They stood side by side in the glow of history made right, their lives bound not by scandal, but by sacrifice remembered. The cameras captured the scene, but the truth of it was deeper than any headline. It was written in legacy and honor, in the simple, unshakable power of a promise kept. And as the meeting ended, Daniel thought of one thing: the next loaf he baked would not just feed a body. It would feed a memory. It would feed a legacy. The sun dipped low over the neighborhood, painting the windows of the Legacy Bakery with strokes of gold. Inside, the space was alive with sound and warmth, laughter of children, the hum of ovens, and the rhythm of feet against the old wooden floors. A year had passed since the night Daniel Hale almost gave up. A year since Clara Rhodes opened her father's journal and turned history into destiny. Now, the bakery wasn't just a corner shop. It was a beacon, a place where veterans' families found training, where single parents learned new trades, where people who once carried only burdens now carried trays of fresh bread and steaming pies. The air itself seemed to hum with healing. Daniel stood at the counter, his apron dusted with flour, his hands pulling a tray from the oven. His touch was steady, confident. Not the hesitant movements of a man weighed down by survival, but the sure strokes of someone who had rediscovered his craft. Behind him, the chalkboard menu listed loaves with names like Honor Roll Rye and Heritage Sourdough. Each one told a story, each one honored a life. Maggie, now 7, zipped through the room like a streak of joy. Her laughter carried higher than the ringing of the bell above the bakery door. In her arms, she clutched a handmade crown fashioned from cardboard and glitter, ready for the night's celebration. "Daddy," she called, running to him. "Don't forget, it's your birthday this time." Daniel knelt, brushing a streak of flour across her cheek in mock seriousness. "How could I forget when my little queen won't let me?" She giggled and pressed the crown onto his head. From the doorway, Clara watched them, her arms folded, her expression soft. She had shed the last of her old armor. No longer the Ice Queen, she had become someone different, a woman who could let herself smile without restraint, who allowed herself to believe that legacy wasn't just about what you build, but who you build it with. She walked forward, carrying a box with careful hands. Inside, a cake. Not the kind bought in haste or sent in secret, but one baked side by side with Daniel and decorated by Maggie's unsteady but joyful hands. A cake that belonged not to wealth or pity, but to family. The room quieted as she set it on the counter. Dozens of candles flickered across the surface, tiny flames reflected in Maggie's wide eyes. The community gathered, close neighbors, veterans, apprentices, friends, each face illuminated by the same warm glow. Clara's voice carried above the hush. Last year, this man had nothing to give his daughter but a promise. Tonight, we stand here because he never broke it. Daniel Hale. You are the reason this place has become more than walls and ovens. You've given us bread, but more than that, you've given us belonging. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He looked at Clara, at Maggie, at the gathered crowd. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man barely holding his life together. He felt whole. Maggie clapped her hands, breaking the hush. Okay, time to sing voices. Rose filling the bakery with the melody of Happy Birthday. Maggie's small voice soared above them all, clear and proud, as if she had been waiting her whole life to give this gift. Daniel closed his eyes, soaking in the sound. It wasn't just a song. It was an anthem. Proof that even the most forgotten birthdays can be remembered, celebrated, redeemed. Make a wish, Daddy Maggie urged as the final note lingered. Daniel looked at her, then at Clara beside her. He didn't need words to know his wish had already come true. Still, he leaned close to the candles, whispered something only the flames could carry, and blew them out. The room erupted in cheers. Maggie threw her arms around him, and Clara rested a hand gently on his shoulder. Their eyes met no ice, no walls, only warmth. Later, as the crowd thinned and laughter drifted into the night air, Daniel, Clara, and Maggie sat together at a small table. A single slice of cake lay on each plate. The moment was quiet, unadorned, and perfect. Daniel lifted his fork, his voice soft. You know, a year ago, I thought birthdays were just reminders of what I couldn't give. Now I know. They're reminders of what can't be taken away. Clara reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. Legacy isn't money, Daniel. It isn't power. It's love that refuses to be forgotten. Maggie, her mouth full of frosting, mumbled, "Best birthday ever." They laughed, the sound echoing through the bakery, weaving itself into the very beams of the building. Outside, the lanterns swayed in the night breeze, casting their golden glow over Maple and 3rd. The city passed by, but inside that little corner, time paused. For one family, for one community, for one night, it was enough. And, as the camera of memory pulled back, catching the image of a father, a daughter, and the woman who chose to stand with them, a final truth lingered. Kindness is not charity, it is legacy. And legacy, in the end, is love. And that's where we'll leave the story for tonight. But before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you listening? From maybe a quiet kitchen after dinner, a late-night drive home, or a cozy chair before bed. Tell me in the comments below. Your stories and your voices make this channel feel like a shared table we all gather around. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so we can keep sharing more journeys together. Every comment, every new subscriber, it all helps these stories find more people who need a little hope. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for spending this time with me. Until we meet again in the next story. Take care, hold on to kindness, and never forget legacy lives in love.